One of the biggest claims to fame for FNaF, which is now 10 years old by the time this video releases, is the vast amounts of lore in the games, the books, and whatever other media FNaF has explored. Hundreds of theories and fan-made timelines have been made to piece together this lore, the most famous of these theorists being MatPat.
Music Man!
But despite all of this, the lore has problems in its current state, purely from a storytelling standpoint. And I wanted to talk about them because not many people do. Let's change that. I figured that releasing a new FNaF video about a year after my original video, and around the 10th anniversary no less, would be a good way to get out of my burnout. I grew up on FNaF, same as most of you, but that doesn't make it perfect and the lore is far from it. Like the video and subscribe because it helps out a ton, and let's begin. Now, way back in the day, when FNaF was simply a silly little indie horror game, the lore wasn't nearly as complicated as it is now. It was pretty straightforward. 5 kids died, possessed the animatronics, killed the phone guy, and now intended to kill you. It was as simple as that. But when the second game rolled around in November, that's when things got interesting. 5 more dead kids, the puppet, and our first look at Purple Guy came along. This is where the theories began, with all evidence pointing to Purple Guy being the culprit for the murders, and the indirect reason for the animatronics' aggression. Of course, even then, the lore wasn't that simple. There were tons of unanswered questions and unconfirmed theories, like Purple Guy being Phone Guy, though as we know now, that was far from the truth. Anyways, FNaF 3 rolls around and changes things up again with Springtrap, who would later turn out to be Purple Guy being spring-locked in the suit. See, what I liked about this game's lore is how the messages from Phone Dude and the recordings from Phone Guy alluded to all of this lore. Only one animatronic existing, the spring locks malfunctioning, Purple Guy being in the spring body suit, all that was built up in some way over the course of the 5 nights. That's good storytelling. And this game was also meant to be the last with its ending, having the whole place burned down with everything inside, and obviously the good ending with the empty animatronic heads had the bonus mini-games that also added to the lore, with the Happiest Day minigame showing the children's souls fading away peacefully. Finally, the kids could find peace knowing their killer was put to rest and that all of this was over. But then FNaF 4 came along and overcomplicated everything with the crying child, Fredbear, and that stupid unopened box. Say what you want about this game, but this isn't good storytelling for what's supposed to be the quote-unquote final chapter. Thankfully, it wasn't, but still. It's fine to leave things open sometimes, but in this game in particular, Scott left too many loose threads. And then along came Sister Location. While, in my opinion, the 4th game complicated the lore badly, I think the opposite for this game. The first 4 games are very similar to one another by design, especially in terms of gameplay, but Sister Location changed things drastically, even in terms of lore. While FNaF 4 and several future games would overcomplicate the lore just for the sake of complicating things, Sister Location added onto the lore without it feeling like it was piled on to the already established parts of it, especially with the Funtime animatronics being part of an older location that was shut down because of Purple Guy, whose name was confirmed to be William Afton, and his daughter being killed by Baby at her own birthday party. This game also introduced Michael Afton, the main character of the original FNaF games and the son of William, who appears at the very end of the game, and Mike being scooped out, then possessed by Ennard, and basically worn as a skin suit until he pukes out the robot guts, then revived as his sister goes, "You won't die," and literally not dying is all great storytelling. This is how you get people theorizing and engaged. I miss this era of FNaF so much, and that's not just me being nostalgic since this is the time I got into FNaF. It's not the best writing of all time, but it's engaging and interesting. FNaF just doesn't have that anymore, in my opinion. Are you starting to see my point? Well, if you're not, keep watching. Lastly for this section, FNaF 6. The game I've always considered as the real end to the original FNaF timeline. And it was for a little bit. Pretty much every loose thread, except of course Stupid Box, all led to this final game. This even had the first mention of Remnant, but I won't talk about that for the sake of my sanity because I actually still don't understand it to this day. Anyways, the game has 3 minigames you can play. Midnight Motorist, which reveals Afton's alcoholism and abuse towards his family, Security Puppet, which finally reveals how Charlie dies and becomes a puppet, and Fruity Maze, showing how Susie became the first of the missing children. Outside of these 3 games, there's also the salvaging animatronics part of the game, all 4 of which are the last 4 animatronics left. Scraptrap, which is Springtrap but with the Neutron style, Scrap Baby, who's separated from Ennard, Molten Freddy, an altered version of Ennard, and Lefty, who has the puppet inside of it. These 4 are all that remains of the Remnant and Souls, so Henry, William's old business partner, plots a scheme to free the souls and damn William to hell, plus put his and Mike's souls to rest. That whole speech went so unbelievably hard, it's still hard to believe that this wasn't actually the end. It sure as hell set itself up to be.
Although for one of you, the darkest pit of hell has opened to swallow you whole, so don't keep the devil waiting, friend.
You even see the graves of the dead kids in the same alignment as the FNaF 3 masks, plus Charlie's up on a hill. My point is, the lore is all resolved and concluded here, or at least the lore around William Afton. But this, in my opinion, was the end of the lore being interesting and the start of it becoming something to despise. The whole reason for me talking about the original games was because I wanted to show that through all the complications, this would have been a great way for it all to be tied up for good without it becoming too bloated. But unfortunately, it wasn't tied up for good and it has become too bloated. Let me explain. Look, maybe I'm old, maybe, but I genuinely do not know jack about the current lore. And the stuff that I do know feels so overcomplicated. Look, I know some people think the Mimic is the quote-unquote coolest FNaF character in the lore. No, he is not. Springtrap took that title years ago. If anything, the Mimic is a good example of the lore being unnecessarily complex for the sake of being complex. I won't get into Help Wanted's lore because for the most part it's fine, I guess. But Security Breach is a whole nother story. Security Breach had so much content that the base game feels incomplete. It's honestly more sad than anything. To this day, even after Ruin, the storytelling still feels so unsatisfying. Especially when it comes to Vanny, or Vanessa, or whatever she calls herself. Half her lines are cut, and she has lines for when she's jumping and running, making me think that she was meant to be playable, which possibly could have added to her character. But nope, she's just a security guard who hates her job and small children. And Gregory just isn't a character. There was nothing there. And he did actually have personality originally with there being cut audio of him crying and sniffling, but nope, they cut that too. Hell, there is a 30-minute video of cut lines. I'm sure there's a good explanation for why so much was cut, but regardless, the storytelling in this game is so bad. No character feels like a character or has any personality, there's no real story, and Burntrap is here now for some reason, and there's a badder version of Molten Freddy, which, now that I think about it, it's just as bad as when they brought back Palpatine with no explanation. I always come back, it's just somehow Palpatine returned. Don't worry though, because they retconned this with a Mimic, so it's not actually Afton, but still. Do you realize how awful it is from a storytelling perspective to have the main villain be a character only in the books? See, there's my problem. The one thing causing my dislike for the modern lore. FNaF is too big, and the lore is too bloated, especially because of the damn books. People shouldn't have to read books to be able to understand all the lore. They should add onto it, yes, but they shouldn't be a part of the main storyline. The Mimic shows up at the very end of Ruin, you run away from him, and then you get away and fall like Henry Stein, and that's the end of Ruin. The only knowledge the player gets is, it's been here for ages, scary. And in the other ending, where he, for whatever reason, wears a lion mascot costume thing, he gets scooped, I think? It's hard to tell. And that's it. That's the other ending. A casual fan would be dumbfounded by these endings. I don't get where they were going for here. I'm pretty sure their intention was to bring Afton back, but after seeing the backlash for that, they invented the Mimic and brought him into the main timeline. Look, having a character from the books make like a cameo would be cool, but to have them be seemingly the main villain is just not great writing. The books shouldn't be a requirement, they should be a fun addition like how Bendy does it. Looks like a Mimic game got revealed, so I guess what I said here is kinda invalid. But not really. Security Breach still doesn't feel right to me. Honestly, nothing in Security Breach feels like it can be enjoyed on its own. It all feels like it's just confusing for the sake of being confusing. It's not to the extent of Hello Neighbor literally changing the lore when people get it right, but it's still bad nonetheless, in my opinion. Before, it was complicated but engaging because there were always little hints and clues left here and there, and the fandom always had to decide their own conclusions for certain parts of the lore. That kept people like me hooked. But in this current era of FNaF, the lore is all over the place. Hell, Help Wanted literally says the games are also games in universe. What? And people complained that the movie didn't follow the lore accurately, but honestly, if they attempted that, it would probably be a terrible movie to watch, so they had no choice but to alter some things here and there to make it coherent for the casual audience. If only they tried that in the games. And again, Vanny's plotline went nowhere, but it could have been intriguing, the malware of Glitchtrap corrupting Vanessa and giving her a split personality as she struggled to fight back. But instead, she's just bleh. Most of Security Breach, most of modern FNaF, and most of the lore lacks any personality. The current lore, anyway. It isn't even scary anymore. It used to be engaging, but now it's just over the top and messy. As a writer and a guy who loves good storytelling, FNaF's story has gone on too long and become way too cluttered, doing the same tropes over and over, and it honestly sucks. I don't want this video to be viewed as me complaining about the lore being too hard to understand. I want it to be seen as a criticism of the storytelling being bad and how it used to be good. I just want a franchise I grew up with to have good writing. Is that so bad? My main point is that FNaF has a bad habit of leaving us with more questions than answers, with more loose threads than tight knots. It's not a bad thing to leave your audience guessing and coming up with ways to tie things together, But to do it over and over with the same stupid characters without a concrete answer is where I draw the line. Years ago, I used to love watching game theory videos about the FNaF lore, but now I just cannot get into it at all. At the end of the day though, this is all my opinion. I'm sure you guys have your own takes on the lore, so let me know in the comments what you think about it all. Thank you all for the support over the course of a year, whether you've been around since the beginning or are just joining recently, thank you. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
Poppy Playtime is the unofficial sequel to Breaking Bad.